Hello and welcome to Investment Property Income. My name is Jeff Eady, and joining me today is one of the top mortgage brokers in Canada. He's actually built a brokerage of over 90 employees at one point in time. He's helped countless Canadians take steps towards securing their financial future. On top of that, he's a true numbers guy, but he loves to have a great time. Please welcome Jonathan Tilger. Jonathan, how are you today?
I am excellent, Jeff. Thank you for that incredible warm intro. And I'm very excited to be here with you today, going through to show everyone what we've got.
Well, I'm excited to have you. So I'll shut up and let you take it from here, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. So today we're going to be talking about money-making secrets of the wealth. Not many people may know this, but the majority of millionaires have either made their money through real estate, or those who have not, they will often keep a large percentage of their assets held in real estate just because they see the value that real estate brings. Now,
Jonathan, sorry, just to make a point on that, that's actually how the Kennedy family became known as jet setters. They owned the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and that provided them with enough income to have that lifestyle that everybody looked at, the glitz and the glamour.
exactly the case. So we are going to be talking about financial information today. Because of that, I need to start with a disclaimer. So here we go. So this is not advice. These are my opinions. As everybody knows, opinions are like armpits. Everybody has them, and most of them stink. So having said that, my question to you is, what's in it for you today? Why are most people here listening to what we have to share? And for the majority of people I speak with, they really come down to one of really 3 or 4 top financial concerns of the average household. And this is number 1, how do they pay off their home sooner? So they can be mortgage free? Number 2, how can they put money aside so their children can go to the school of their choice, and financing is not a concern or basically the roadblock that prevents them from going there? Number 3, after those 2 things are completed, how do they build extra wealth for themselves to enjoy the retirement that they really want? And the 4th one that I'm seeing now more a days than ever, which is how can they set their kids up for success? How can they help their kids get into what a lot of people view as the middle class or above? In the middle class, I like to view the middle class is really the distinction between the middle class and not being there or above comes down to home ownership. Can someone get into a house? And so many kids nowadays are requiring assistance from parents to help get them into that first home. If you were to walk along the street and just randomly pick people and say, hey, what's your retirement plan? And this is kind of, I mean, it's kind of a joke, but at the same time, so many people say, well, I want a Lotto Max, 649, Cash for Life scratch card, and 2 roll up the rims to win. You randomly stop 10 people on the street. Probably about half of them will give you the answer of something along the lottery. They'll say it jokingly, but they're saying that because the reality is they really do not have any firm plan for how they're going to get to the point where they can really enjoy life on their terms.
Jonathan, I love the 2 roll up the rims. That's great. Thanks for that.
So before we really get into talking about real estate specifically, let's get into one of the things that I love. And this, when I first came across this, it really changed my perspective on money and how you make money. This is the cash flow quadrants. Jeff, have you heard of this before?
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of experience with the cash flow quadrant. My mom was the first one that kind of introduced me to this. We were reading Robert Kiyosaki at the time, and I'll let you kind of do the slides, but if it's all right, I'll kind of talk about this one because
yeah, go right ahead, please.
Near and dear to my heart. Yeah, that's so. First one, everybody starts off as an employee. I remember working in a garage when I was 13, sweeping it out and learning how much money you don't make working hourly. And a lot of people tend to progress into the self-employed area. And that's where my mom was. This was the realization that this was the real turning point or aha moment for both of us, because I grew up watching my mom own her own job. And she was a hairdresser, owned her own hair salon, but she really started to understand, and I started to understand, that if she got sick or if she tried to take a vacation, then the money stopped flowing in. It was completely reliant upon her being there. Which, when you start to understand the next one, the business owner and leveraging your time over other people's efforts, that's when my mind really started to open up to this. There's an old saying that it's better to get 1% of what 100 people do instead of 100% of what you do. That's how people, that's why a boss can go on vacation and play golf when the employees are there. In fact, one of the largest corporations in the world is run by teenagers. That's McDonald's. The CEOs don't sell the French fries and burgers, but they have it. They've leveraged their time over other people and made that work for them. And then the next one is the investor side, and this is truly what we're going to be talking about today. This is where your money starts to work for you, and it creates an income so that you don't have to go trade your time for money every day.
That is great, Jeff. And yeah, the only thing I'll add to that you were saying about the business owner, really that's about building a system. And with the investor side, the same thing. It's about having a system and having a system that really, the system does the work. So that way it's a matter of you just have to plug a piece into the system, then that keeps the wheels going so that the money still continues to come in. So we're going to talk about the safe way. And again, Jeff, I'm going to ask you here. So what are people taught as the safe way? What do you want to do when you make money, when you've got that money? What do you want to do with it?
Well, in most cases, you have to start saving. And big one I see advertised all the time is the GIC account because it's guaranteed.
Yeah, exactly. So if we talk about a GIC, what's sort of an average return on a GIC?
1.5%, maybe 2%.
All right, so let's be generous, say 2%. So let's just say you've got $10,000. So $10,000, 2%. So in a year, that will become $10,200. So you've made $200 on your money. I mean, it's better than making nothing, but still, it's $200. So you've got a profit of $200. But keep in mind that, especially when you're dealing with money earned through income, that is taxed at your tax bracket. So every single dollar you earn there is taxed as the same as if it was money you went out and earned at a job. So let's just say you're at a 30% tax bracket. So your net, so that's a net of $140. So it breaks down so that 2% return is reduced down to 1.4%. Now we talk about growth. And I'm sure everyone has heard of a thing called inflation. So what is inflation? It effectively means that loaf of bread that you bought today that costs $3, if it's 3% rate of inflation, that means next year will be $3.09. And year over year, people see this happening. So going back, so we got a 1.4% return, add an inflation rate, put an inflation rate of 3%. So that's actually going to reduce the return because every item you're buying next year is roughly 3% higher than it was this year. That takes away from the buying power of your money today. So that's a net return of minus 1.6%. So that's effectively losing money year over year by putting it just into savings.
That's crazy. Your savings is actually losing you money.
Exactly. Now, I'm not saying that don't save. You definitely need to save to get yourself ahead and to be able to invest and do other things. You need the savings part, but savings alone will not get you there. We really need to look at assets that will produce both income and grow in value. And also, there's a thing called leverage. So giving us the ability to leverage our money to give us more buying power. Which leads us perfectly into this next slide, talking about the banks and how the banks make their decisions. And I will emphasize, if you're just paying to this, if you're just following this presentation and you're like, well, what parts do I really want to take away? This slide is probably the most valuable part. So if you take nothing else out of this presentation, pay attention to this slide, because when I really understood this and what it's saying, it completely changed my perception on how things should be done and really how money can be made. So Jeff, let me ask you a question. You've got $100,000 available to invest. You walk into your bank. What are the options you've got available to you to put your money into?
Well, I can speak from personal experience. The first thing I got sold on was an RRSP and a mutual fund, but stocks, bonds, business, if you want to own your own job or start something. Then, of course, the topic of today's conversation, property.
Yeah, exactly. So going through, so business, let's just say it's $100,000 available. With the business, you're buying yourself a job. In this case here, it's a small business. So I said it's buying a job, shares in a company. It could be stocks, bonds, mutual funds, anything along those lines. And then there's property. Now, let's just say that again, you're walking into the bank you've dealt with for the last 15, 20 years, Jeff. And you're saying, listen, I've got this $100,000 to invest in a business. That's not quite enough to get the business that I desire. How much additional money will you give me to help me invest so I can really buy something larger, something more in line with what my vision is?
Well, typically it's going to be a hearty handshake and a good luck wish. But let's say they're feeling generous, they may lend you as much as the collateral you have, so you could $100,000 for $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, if they're feeling generous, or you've really done a lot of research and you've really sold them, saying, "Hey, here's my vision on this business." The second thing, so again, you walk in, I've got this $100,000 to invest. Give me your bank's best financial advisor. Help them invest my money wisely for me. How much are you going to give me to help me increase what I can invest today?
For the purposes of this, I'll say they'll do the same as they would with a business and match your investment, but you got to be a real good customer for that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are options for leveraged accounts and other things, but again, you've got to know what you're doing for those. So third scenario, you walk into your bank. Listen, you walk into, in this case, it's a bank you've never been to before. I've got this $100,000. I would like to buy a piece of property as an investment. I don't know where the property is yet. I don't know whether it's going to be a condo, a house, a townhouse. I don't know any of that yet. I've got $100,000. How much are you going to give me in addition to my portion of this investment, so I have an idea of the price range that I can buy?
That's an interesting one because I just want to make a side note there. You mentioned walking into a bank that you've never been to before, and being a mortgage broker, that's exactly your job is to walk into those banks they've never been to before and deal with them. Typically a bank's only got their products, but if my numbers are correct, I believe it's 20% down on investment property. So basically, you go in with $100,000, they're going to give you an additional four.
That is exactly the case. So we go through, so that's exactly it. It's 20% down. So you got $100,000, they will give you $400,000, so you can actually buy a $500,000 property. So going through this example here, so we've got the 100, they'll give you 100, 100, they'll give you 100 with the property, 100, they will give you 400,000. So we now have $200,000 invested, $200,000 and $500,000 invested. Let's just say the goal is to make $100,000 over a 5-year period. What type of return do we need on each of these? Well, with the business, a 50% return. With the shares, again, a 50% return over 5 years. With real estate, you need only a 20% return over 5 years. Compounded, that works out to less than 4% annually. Over 5 years, does that seem realistic with real estate?
Yeah, especially considering the last few years of growth in your market, the GTA, it's extremely realistic in a 5-year period.
Exactly. So I just want to sort of ask a question. This is similar, but a slightly different way of asking this question. Would you like to learn how you can make a 25% return on your investment?
Who wouldn't?
So you buy a property, buy an investment property for $500,000. You invest $100,000 of your money. The bank lends you $400,000. So let's just say the property value increases by 5%. So that $500,000 property is now worth $525,000. So it's gone up $25,000. Keep in mind, you invested only $100,000. So that is a 25% return on your initial investment.
Jonathan, that's in 1 year?
In a lot of markets, that is in 1 year.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
Now, a lot of people ask, well, what about the risks? Now, the first thing to understand is that when you're looking at real estate, the risk is not equal to the amount of debt you owe. A lot of people look and they say, well, that's $400,000 of risk. No, risk is really, it's really a function of, it's the demand, control, and your exit strategies. Can you do things to improve the value on this? Um, what are your options should you need to sell it? Different things like these. So, so your risk, as I said, if we go through, you owe $400,000, your risk is not $400,000. Your investment was $100,000. You could look at that as your total risk, but there are so many ways with real estate that you can negate that. You've got
Jonathan, if
options.
I'm sorry, if I could just add to that, I really like the point you're making there, because if you're investing in let's say a stock, you have absolutely no control, and your only exit strategy is to sell it. And if there's no demand, there's a massive amount of risk there.
Exactly the case. So with real estate, you've got different options. You can rent the property. You can sell the property. You can do direct things to this property to increase its value for either rent or sale. For instance, you can buy a property, you can completely redo the kitchens, the bathrooms, redo your flooring. I mean, often just a fresh coat of paint on some properties can get an extra few $100s a month in rent. You can change it, like for instance, changing it to a duplex. So you buy a detached house that is a single family house and you put in a basement unit. So you now have 2 units able to rent. Jeff, you ever heard of a rent to own option?
Yeah, actually, I've done some work in that area. It's a really good option for people who don't necessarily have the credit or the full down payment right now.
So what this option is you find somebody who really likes your house. They say, hey, listen, I really like your house. I want to own this house, but I cannot afford it today. I will not qualify to get the right financing, or I don't have all my down payment together, whichever the case is. And so you can set them up on a rent to own contract. This is where they're putting down a larger deposit with you to give them the option to purchase this property by a set date at a given price. So that way, you know, at that point, you know, on entry of that contract, what you're going to sell it for, be it in 2 years' time. In addition, I mean, in addition, if for any reason they're not able to close on that property, then that additional deposit they put down to secure that contract with you, that becomes null and void, and the money comes to you. There are also options, basically anything you've done to increase the value of the property. You've got the ability to actually pull out funds from that property that you've built up in equity. So you can pull that out for other purposes, be it to invest in something else, or if perhaps you need it to meet some other life obligations you've got.
Jonathan, I just want to add to that one. That's really important. A lot of people's old school mentality was to pay off the house and live mortgage free. But truly in today's economy, especially with the mortgage rates where they're at, you have the ability to separate the bricks and mortars value from the actual cash value and put both of them to work, and both of them can grow.
Exactly the case. So other concerns that come up on a regular basis, and one of them being, I don't want to be a landlord. What if tenants don't pay or they damage the property? And I don't want to fix toilets in the middle of the night. And this is a story I personally love, because years ago I was hanging out with some guys who are a few years older than me, and they were talking about real estate as an investment. And one of the top things that came up in the conversations was, you know what, I don't want to own real estate because I don't want to get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning regarding a leaky toilet. Now, the interesting part is that in that same conversation, one of them said, hey, listen, my brother-in-law, he's actually a guy in the States. He owns a lot of real estate and he's done very well for himself. So, but at the same time, that was their top concern. Now, let me tell you, in my experience, I've owned, for many years, I've owned multiple real estate properties. I've owned over five properties at one point. That was at a time. You know how many calls I got in the middle of the night regarding a leaky toilet?
I'm gonna say maybe one.
Yeah, but it was a wrong number.
The wrong number. I love it.
They were calling for somebody else. So realistically, that's not really a concern, not something that comes up. But if it is a concern, something that's a major thing, there are options, there are solutions, such as getting a property manager in addition to insurance, who can take care of all that. So let's look at the
That that really makes it just a passive investment. So all you do is just collect your checks every month and manage your manager, right?
Exactly the case. So let's talk about the compound effect and how things sort of roll out over time. You'll see here that the growth rate I put in is 3%. Now, I know before we were talking about growth rates of 5% or higher. I've used 3%. I like to keep things conservative when I'm running this, and I use 3% because since 1948, when they first started tracking real estate prices until very recently, the growth rate was actually 3.8%. To keep it more conservative, I ran it back at 3% and says, does it make sense at 3%? So you'll see the increase in value, and year one's $15,000, it's $15,540, and in year five it's $16,883. And the reason why that's increasing, even though we've got a static growth rate of 3%, is because the growth rate, remember, it's a compound growth rate, meaning that the growth rate is calculated on the year at the start of the value, not the year from the start of the period. So over 5 years, you can see this property's gone up to $579,000. So that is a $79,000 increase in the value. In addition to this, it gets a little bit better because we also have what's termed as principal paydown. Now, what is that? Every single month when the mortgage payment is being made, part of the payment goes towards interest and part towards principal. So the part towards principal goes back into the owner's, effectively goes back into the owner's pocket in the form of build up in the equity month over month over month. So 5 years from now, that's approximately $51,000. So that property's gone up to 131, or rather your growth over 5 years is now about $131,000. Now let's just say that we've got to account for things like maintenance and repair and a few other things that might come up with property ownership. Let's throw in $500 a month for that. So that is $30,000 over a 5-year period. We're still up over $100,000 over 5 years. How does that sound to you, Jeff?
That is a heck of a lot better than the GICs you were talking about before.
Yeah, exactly the case. So let's see how this thing rolls out over time. So 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We can see that obviously the 131 we just talked about, 285 in year 2 or year 10 years from now, 20 years from now, $676,000 or 676% growth, and 30-year time frame, over $1.2 million built up in equity in that property. I like to look at real estate. It's like you're planting a tree. And when you plant a tree, Jeff, what does it need at the start, especially those first few years?
I would say a little TLC, a little water, a little fertilizer.
Yeah, exactly. So when you initially start getting into it, yeah, it probably needs a little bit more TLC, a little bit more care during the first few years. But as things press forward, that property grows, that tree grows. And what's the beautiful thing with a tree?
I'm guessing by the apples that they grow fruit.
Exactly. And when you take a piece of fruit off that apple, does it harm the tree in any way?
No, it just keeps producing.
Does it damage the value of that tree long term?
Absolutely not.
And I look at that very similar to owning a rental property. When you get that rent this month, does that reduce the value of the property?
No, absolutely not. And you're bearing fruit. I love it.
And so many clients I've worked with have said, okay, you know what? I've got this one property, it's doing this. What happens if I own 2 or 3? Or perhaps a few more? And I like to look at each property. You buy it today, what's it going to be worth 20 years from now? And how much rent will be coming in? And as that mortgage is paid down, what's happening with that cash flow that's coming in month over month that will put income in your pocket that you can live off of without touching the value of that house or that condo?
That's a whole orchard.
So if you're looking at that saying, well, where do you get started? I like to say the best place to start, really where you want to start, is what's your destination? Where do you want to get to? What are the financial concerns you want to look at? What are your dreams? What are your goals? What's the lifestyle you want to have? And the next thing, taking action. I mean, fine to sit there and say, hey, this is what I want to do. But many people look at that stage, but if they don't take action, that first step, then what happens? And really taking action, what do we have to do? Well, we've got to find out how we can get you into that first investment property. And part of it is looking at what you've got available for savings. Another way, though, that most people don't consider is their existing property that they own. What's the equity they have in there? Because there's many strategies we can look at to use that equity, leverage that equity to help get them into that first investment property. And we go back to, again, taking action. Key thing.
Yeah, Jonathan, that reminds me of a quote that the difference between knowledge and wisdom is that wisdom is knowledge applied or with action taken. So that's huge. That fear of taking that first step for so many people stops them from having the future that you're talking about here.
Yeah. So let's just talk about, and that's so great you put that in there, Jeff. That's completely the case. So let's talk about mentioning there accessing equity in the property and how in existing property and how this works. So you can access up to 80% of the value of the property. So let's just say you own a property valued at $800,000 today. You can access up to $640,000. Obviously, if you've got a mortgage on that property, you've got to take that into account. So if there's $500,000 owing on that, that leaves us $140,000 of equity that can be used and leveraged to help get them into or help someone get into an investment property. So we take out, let's just say it's $100,000, and we use this 20% down to give them the ability to buy a $500,000 investment property. And from there, it really comes down to what are the goals? What are the concerns, the financial concerns you want to address? Is it paying off the home in 10 years? With $285,000, would that help people either pay down or pay off their mortgage?
I think that would be a massive help to a lot of Canadians right now.
Now, if it came down to kids' education, $676,000, how does that compare with the education fund you had, Jeff?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that.
All right, fair enough. And wealth for retirement. 1.2 million. How does that sound in 30 years' time to really enjoy retirement on your terms?
Sounds a heck of a lot better than what CPP is going to pay in 30 years.
Now, one of the questions that comes up a lot is, you know what, I don't have that same time frame here. I'm 55 right now. I really want to retire in about 10 to 15 years. I don't have that 30-year time frame. How can I get there? And it really comes down to going back to that orchard. Again, this is with one property alone. But for many clients I speak with, based on the time frame, based on their goals, based on their ambitions, we may need to look at multiple properties. And the beauty with this process, it is repeatable, it is duplicatable. And once you set it up for one, you realize how simple it is to get involved. Adding 2, 3, 4, there isn't a lot more work, or really not, there's not a significant amount more work to own 2 properties than there is 1 or 3 properties.
And Jonathan, I really like that you've got it tied to specific dates on goals, but you've also, I look at the numbers here and I think, wow, each of these you could be accessing the equity at any point in state, any point in time to create those new apple trees as you have them.
That's exactly it. And as you build up the equity, you can really control that on your terms and say, yeah, I'd like to get another property. Or, hey, I'd like to pull the money out to have some life experience. I've always wanted to travel to Italy. Well, you can pull this money out and use it for that purpose if that is your choice. So let's go through and summarize what we really spoke about today. So as I said, back to the one slide on the bank and how the bank makes its decisions. That is really the key thing, just understanding based on the bank's actions, based on how the bank is lending, what does that tell you about real estate for security, for growth, and why you want to consider real estate as part of your investment objectives. And then it's how you can use this knowledge to, number 1, pay off your home sooner. Number 2, put money aside to help your kids' education. And number 3, building wealth for retirement. And I said number 4, which isn't on this slide right here, but in addition, how you can help set your kids up for success. And as you said at the beginning, Jeff, it's using this to help build generational wealth.
I love that you have the free consultation there. One of the things that I always think about is, you know, Information is free. It's the action that really prevents people from doing, taking the steps to secure their future like that. And even reaching out and getting the information. Your best case scenario is what you've laid out here, multi-millions of dollars at retirement. And no matter what, still your worst case scenario is exactly you're at where you're at right now. So it never hurts to reach out and get that information.
All right, thanks for that, Jeff. It's been awesome talking to you about this today.
Yeah, I appreciate your time very much, Jonathan. You can see that people can get a hold of Jonathan at the phone number and email that are there. Also, if you want more information, you're not ready to take that first step and to reach out, you can always go to investmentpropertyincomeBook.com, download the book that Jonathan and I co-authored earlier this year, and that'll also get you on your email list, on our email list, so that you'll get lots of stuff that we put out there, educating people on the mortgage market and investment property ownership. So thanks so much, Jonathan, for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me.